Hello. Welcome to Apocalypse Now, the podcast where we dive into some of the most devastating environmental disasters in history and explore how we can prevent them from happening again. I'm Holly Stower, an environmental researcher who has worked with major companies to solve real-world sustainability challenges with technology. Each episode of Apocalypse Now, I'll uncover one of the planet's worst environmental crimes, examining what happened, why it happened, who's responsible, and the far-reaching consequences for people and the planet. Then, in the following episode, we'll shift from disaster to solutions, the apocalypse to the now, exploring how innovation, policy, and you can help rewrite the story and highlight how far we are from being utterly apocalypsed. So I've spent the last few weeks researching to bring you the next disaster. And it's the fourth time that this disaster has happened, and it's still ongoing to this day. So today I'll be talking about the most recent mass coral bleaching event, the fourth Global Mass Coral Bleaching event. And I've kind of nerded out on corals for this episode, but my God, are they little wonders. So here's why this event is such a disaster, and it's kind of hard to pin responsibility on anyone, but I'm going to try. So, higher temperatures due to climate change are causing ocean acidification, which in turn is killing precious corals around the world. Coral reef habitats, although covering less than 1% of the ocean floor, support 25% of all marine species. And these bleaching events are getting ever more frequent, reducing corals' resilience and their ability to bounce back, and they're ultimately dying. We may lose this precious habitat and all the organisms that it supports, with the apocalyptic scenario being a mass ocean extinction event, which in itself will see the permanent loss of marine species and biodiversity loss, as well as natural coastal flood protection. And in turn, this will catalyze reduced fishing stocks, coastal erosion, loss of tourism opportunities and income, as well as loss of livelihood, food insecurity, and the cultural and spiritual loss of these really special places. So why is coral so cool? So coral creates some of the most diverse ecosystems in the world. Coral is a super unique organism. It's colonial. So when you look at one coral, it looks like one single organism. Well, it actually looks like a rock, but it looks like one single organism or even a plant. In fact, it's a large colony of small organisms. And these organisms are individual animals called polyps. They have a mouth, a digestive tract, and tentacles to enable them to sting and catch prey, which is zooplankton and sometimes small fish. Many corals live in a symbiotic relationship with a plant or algae called zooxanthellae, which means they both mutually rely and benefit from the relationship. These zooxanthellae, algae, live in the tissue of the coral. This provides the zooxanthellae with a protected environment. Being an animal, it produces CO2 and water as a waste product. In turn, the zooxanthellae are photosynthetic, so they can use and remove the waste CO2, water, and use sunlight to photosynthesize, producing nutrients for the algae, which the corals use to make proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, as well as calcium carbonate, the substance which enables them to build their structure and skeleton. That's in the case of hard corals. I'll get to that. It's the perfect recycling and symbiotic relationship of materials and nutrients in typically nutrient-poor tropical waters. A coral is like a small city, with the coral providing the structures, the buildings, and the workers, whilst the algae is producing the energy to power the city. The animal part or coral feeds at night, which is why if you've ever been diving in a location in the day and then the same location at night, corals look different. Some with visible filaments protruding and moving as they sting and catch their tiny prey, while the zooxanthellae is active in the day, taking advantage of the sun and photosynthesizing. This is why you mostly find corals in shallow waters where the sunlight can penetrate. And if you listen to my previous episode on the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, this is why when plastics create this blocking effect, it can really damage the corals because they can't photosynthesize. So corals are split into hard corals and soft corals. Hard corals literally change the landscape. These are the ones which produce the calcium carbonate, a substance which most shells are made of. This is deposited below the feeding polyps, creating sort of a dead skeleton and creating these giant complex structures. Growing these skeletons enables the corals to compete with other corals and grow higher to reach more sun and outcompete the ones below. Soft corals, such as sea fingers or fan corals, they don't produce this calcium carbonate skeleton and they don't build the reef. Instead, they use crystal plates called screllets to give their body structure and protect against predators. These crystal plates are also made from calcium carbonate, but in a different form than hard corals. So with a softer structure, they are more vulnerable, so have a new trick up their hypothetical sleeves. Chemicals. So soft corals produce chemical defenses to ward off predators and competing corals. So due to their similar stinging tentacles, corals are the same animal group as jellyfish or sea anemone. There are around 6,000 different species of corals that we know about. To give you an idea of scale, the coral reef in Australia, the Great Barrier Reef, is home to about 600 different coral species. Coral is the only organism that you can view from space. This is likely the most famous reef, again, the Great Barrier Reef. So coral reefs begin to form when a free-swimming coral larvae is attached to a submerged rock. Coral reefs have a very, very slow growth rate, about 0.3 to 2 centimeters per year for massive corals and up to 10 centimeters per year for branching corals. So it can take up to 10,000 years for a coral reef to form. Barrier reef atolls can take around 100,000 to 30 million years to fully form. And many coral structures are absolutely ancient. How they reproduce. So some corals produce asexually, ready to find a new home. Polyps split from their parent. But the majority of hard corals reproduce sexually via mass spawning. This occurs once a year in a mass synchronized multi-species orgy across entire colonies of coral reefs. People don't know exactly when this will happen, but they believe it's from cues from the lunar cycle of the moon and when they align with water temperature, and that signal that tonight is the night. And all these corals release their tiny sperms and eggs, creating a sexy underwater blizzard of billions of tiny yellow, white, and red and orange sparkles. So we don't know how they all know it's the night. Imagine in any other environment, multiple different species communicating or just knowing that today is spawning day. But the synchronicity occurs every time. This is crucial as the sperms and the eggs only last a few hours. If they join together, they create an embryo or a coral larvae called a planula. Then these float to the surface. Then they are carried by ocean currents so that they get a good enough distance to have the best chance of finding a new home rather than growing exactly where their parent corals are. These can float in the ocean for days, looking for a good place to settle. Many corals prefer to settle on a type of hard algae known as crustose coralline algae, which I'm going to shorten to CCA, which releases a chemical signal that the planula can pick up and is attracted to. They are also attracted to healthy reefs with a mix of coral types. If it finds a good spot, it will swim down, attach itself, and then metamorphosizes into a primary polyp. This can take just one day, and if all goes well, can grow into a brand new colony, a brand new coral. However, billions of others die in the process, either not finding a suitable sperm or egg, or place to settle, or getting eaten along the way. It's a big feeding event for lots of fish as well. So after the excitement of the big full moon orgy, the new colonies are ready to settle down and seek out real estate, looking for healthy environments, rich in diversity, to set up house and build more reef. But now these new colonies must keep up with the Joneses, and the competition is fierce. Like many developing metropolitan cities, having initially selected for diversity, the gentrification begins. Or, more accurately, the speciesism begins, with neighbouring corals fighting each other for dominance. But this is no normal turf war. Picture The Purge meets Alien. So some corals thrust sting-like filaments from their stomachs into competitors to digest them. Others may attack with its stinging tentacles. Some also have chemical weapons. Some soft corals produce terpenes to make the environment less favorable to their neighbors. Incidentally, these same chemicals are actually being investigated for their cancer-fighting properties, as well as many other medical benefits to us. But for corals, the better the fighter, the more space and resources they can dominate. And if a coral recognizes a neighboring coral has a similar genetic makeup, the two can literally join forces and fuse together to create a new mega colony. Over time, these structures become so huge that they can protect the adjacent land from extreme weather. And humans have been benefiting from this for years and years. We have built cities where land masses are protected by coral reefs. They act as wave breakers, absorbing wave energy instead of that energy being deposited on shore. This reduces flood risk and coastal erosion, so the loss of land. A healthy reef can absorb 97% of wave energy. However, the opposite is also true. Once these corals become damaged, this benefit is reduced and local land masses are vulnerable. Corals are essential to the health of our ocean and our planet. While covering less than 1% of the ocean floor, they support around 25% of all marine species. They are extremely biodiverse areas, often described as the rainforests of the sea. They provide food, shelter, and breeding grounds for numerous fish, crustaceans, mollusks, turtles, marine mammal species. Many fish spend their young juvenile stages in corals, protecting themselves from predators prior to moving to the open ocean, living out the mature stages of their life. We discussed earlier the beautiful symbiosis between the zooxanthellae algae and the animal polyps in corals, and the synchronized nutrient cycle between the two organisms. This relationship also provides nutrients to other organisms, but all of the organisms in the reef create this closed-loop nutrient cycling system that is incredibly efficient. Nothing gets wasted. Imagine if humans recycled, reused every little thing we made. Reused every Coke bottle, repaired and remade every iPhone, every reel of dental floss. This is how advanced and efficient the reef is. Corals provide both the backbone, the foundation, and the engine of these tight cycles. To highlight these benefits further for specific organisms, so fish and invertebrates like starfish or crabs eat and excrete nutrients which feed phytoplankton and algae. Fish rely on the microhabitats of coral reefs. For example, when a parrotfish wants to sleep, finds a really good crevice in a coral reef and creates this mucus bubble around the entrance of this crevice. So it literally blows a giant snot bubble that hides itself from predators. This shields their scent from predators and acts as a physical barrier as well from parasites. It also acts as an early warning system. So if the bubble breaks, it wakes the parrotfish up nanoseconds earlier, giving it time to react. Filter feeders. So filter feeders like sponges and bivalves, such as clams or mussels, they capture inedible and dissolved organic matter and convert it into edible particulate matter. Filter feeders need the hard surfaces of corals to prevent being swept away by currents, while the surrounding coral manages and soothes the flow of water, enabling a steady but gentle stream of plankton and organic particles for the filter feeders to feed on. Regarding coral reef filter feeders, sponges are the most important. And sponges and corals have a mutualistic relationship in what's called the sponge loop. Sponges absorb about 90% of the organic carbon that corals release. This in turn cleans and filters the water, which would otherwise block sunlight from reaching the photosynthetic corals. Detritivores. The detritivores are like worms or bacteria. They help decompose dead organisms. This releases the nutrients back into the water for reuse. This is known as the microbial loop. This recycles dissolved organic matter, too small for most organisms to eat, and converts it into bacterial biomass. Like most organisms, the corals host beneficial bacteria on its surface, its microbiome, which protects the corals. This outcompetes harmful bacteria and can protect it against pathogens. Corals release a mucus rich in organic carbon, which feeds those microbes, and these microbes are eaten by larger zooplankton, which are then prey for coral. While the bacteria also releases other nutrients like ammonium, nitrate, and phosphate, which the zooxanthellae algae need to photosynthesize. And on a larger human scale, reefs are the engines that support fish stocks. From the 52 million people who rely on subsistence fishing to the 113 million people involved in small-scale fisheries, up to the $5.7 billion made annually from fishing for the global economy. Annual net benefits from healthy coral ecosystems are estimated to be around 30 billion annually across fishing tourism, livelihoods, and employment. I am a frequent scuba diver and just finished a bunch of courses to be able to teach diving. From experience, the majority of this economy is centered around the reefs. People want to dive to see marine life. They envisage bright colors, rich diversity of fish and corals, and the highlights of dives, maybe spotting a turtle, or this magical, serene moment where 3 schools of fish converge. But when you're on a dive boat, people are talking about a lot about the big stuff, and the big stuff can only be there if the coral reefs are there. So how does reef damage translate into economic impact? At least 94 countries and territories benefit from reef tourism. In 23 of these, reef tourism accounts for more than 15% of GDP. Countries such as the Philippines, Tanzania, Fiji, and Indonesia are most vulnerable to the effects of reef degradation, with high exposure to reef threats, high dependence, with a lower adaptive capacity. So they are experiencing really high threats onto their coral reefs, but do not have resources or capacities established to be able to be resilient to these impacts. More and more pedestal gems to visit for divers are those untouched and pristine reefs such as Raja Ampat in Indonesia, and these are becoming rarer and rarer. Indonesia has the largest coral reef system in the world. Reef-related industries bring in more than $3 billion a year and support over 1 million jobs. Projections predict that if reef degradation keeps going at the current pace, those revenues could drop by as much as 75%. And that's a massive hit. It also pays to protect these reefs. The economic benefit of keeping them healthy are estimated to be 15 to 20 times greater than the cost of the conservation itself. So investing in coral protection isn't just good for the environment, it's smart economics. However, in connecting the money to the risk is more difficult in practice. Finally, coral reefs hold huge cultural value, vital to well-being, community identity, and community cohesion. For example, coastal First Nation peoples in Australia and the Pacific Islands believe that sharks are their ancestors and sometimes gods. Harming a shark may be the same as harming a member of your family. Many communities care for the sharks, also by caring for their habitat. Fijian people believe that sharks are the embodiment of a sea god, and therefore they feed those sharks as an ancestral offering, but also as part of current efforts in shark conservation, as well as tourism preservation. Sharks are often the apex predators of reefs, relying on the reefs for food and in turn managing fish populations and maintaining balance. So, what is the fourth mass extinction? Where did it happen and why? The quick answer is, it's a mass coral bleaching event where 84% of global coral reefs are affected. It began in January 2023, and it is the largest recorded to date. And it continues to this day. And it happened because of you. Well, more precisely, climate change, causing heat stress, and so all of us, but probably more accurately, fossil fuel companies. The first mass bleaching event occurred in 1998. This was driven by unusually warm sea surface temperatures, accelerated by a strong El Niño, which is a naturally occurring climate pattern which affects the central and eastern tropical Pacific Ocean. These occur every 2 to 7 years and last 9 to 12 months. This causes sea surface temperatures to rise by about 0.5 degrees Celsius over normal temperatures. But the difference between naturally occurring El Niño events leading to bleaching and today is the frequency of these events. So since 1998, there have been 3 more coral bleaching events. The frequency of these events mean coral reefs have less time to recover and more corals are dying. These bleaching events are exacerbated by climate change, warming sea temperatures, and so have become increasingly prolonged and severe. In 1998, around 21% of reefs experienced bleaching level heat stress. This increased to 37% in 2010, then 68% in the third event over 2024 to 2027, until today, where 84% of coral reefs have been affected since 2023. So what's actually happening to the corals? So the burning of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas, and the production of methane from gas pipeline leaks and livestock production, so cow burps, causes greenhouse gases, which are trapped in our atmosphere. These have a greenhouse effect, trapping the heat from the sun in our atmosphere, which heats the earth. While the ocean covers around 70% of the Earth's surface, the ocean actually absorbs around 90% of this excess heat. While the ocean is an incredible buffer and a carbon sink, it's suffering the consequences. Increased heat is causing cascading effects, marine heat waves, melting sea ice, sea level rise, and ocean acidification. Today, the world has warmed by an average of 1.1 degrees. While that doesn't seem like a lot, it's actually resulted in an estimated 60% of marine ecosystems to be classified as degraded, as well as overfishing, pollution, And other bad things. It's estimated that warming of 1.5 degrees will threaten to destroy about 70 to 90% of coral reefs, while 2 degrees means 100% loss and a point of no return. Apologies, but the bad news continues. Under heat stress, corals expel their algae, the algae that's essential for the nutrient sharing capacity of corals. And the coral loses its major food source. It can then turn white, leaving it susceptible to disease. While heat stress from climate change is the greatest threat to corals, there are also other stresses that cause coral bleaching. Climate change also disrupts naturally occurring warming ocean currents, which can also lead to cooling. In January 2010, colder water temperatures in the Florida Keys saw temperatures drop by 6 to 7 degrees Celsius. And this caused a bleaching event which resulted in corals' deaths. From the sky to the land to the sea, corals are being beaten up. One cause or effect of climate change and human industry makes the next one worse in this awful negative feedback loop for coral reefs. Climate change also increases solar radiation, which can cause coral bleaching, while heavy storms, which are more frequent with climate change, can dilute salty ocean water with fresh water, which causes bleaching. While these storms and poor waste disposal in industrial sectors, or excess fertilizer or pesticides in farming, and forest fires and deforestation can cause the runoff of pollutants and sediments, which can also stress the corals out and cause bleaching. There are so many culprits responsible for the damage of coral reefs, all of which converge and overlap in a horrible death by 1,000 cuts. There is a global shared neglect and diffusion of responsibility, which makes it a really tricky thing to solve. This is one of those climate stories that is messy. And there's no one villain, and the effects are global and the causes are global. The task is huge, but the risks are catastrophic. So before we all expel our own algae, there are promising technical and practical solutions and some beautiful examples of community management which counters this shared neglect. These I'll look in the next episode, such as coral gardening to quickly regrow reefs, or solutions to protect the reef during bleaching events, such as cloud seeding, which is literally creating clouds from chemicals which can block the sun from the reefs and prevent solar radiation, as well as prevent the excess heat. I will go into all of that, and we will leave feeling a lot more optimistic about these solutions. But I really wanted to spend the time to talk about how precious these ecosystems are, how unique they are, how weird and wonderful and fascinating that coral reefs are. And it is important to understand a lot of the life stages so you can understand how a lot of the solutions fit in better. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, whether it's feedback on this episode, questions you'd like answered, or even personal experience with a bleaching event or a solution that you've been involved with. So you can reach out on Instagram at apocalypsenope, or leave a comment wherever you're listening. I'd really appreciate it if you could rate and subscribe. It helps more people find the podcast. I'm Holly Stower. This is Apocalypse Now. And remember, stopping the apocalypse starts with understanding where it begins.